Hello, and welcome to a presentation over the Georgia Code of Ethics by Nicole Walker in relation to an assignment being completed for Ed Leadership 7532, Managing Human Capital. Dr. Taylor Barton is the professor of record at Georgia Southern University. To provide an overview for the Georgia Code of Ethics, I would like to make sure to note that this is a framework for those working in education in which to operate, and there are 10 standards. Those 10 standards are legal compliance, conduct with students, alcohol and drugs, honesty, public funds, remunerative conduct, confidential information, required reporting, professional conduct, and testing. Within this presentation, we're going to look at 10 different hypothetical scenarios from the perspective of a school principal. Within this, we're also going to identify the code of ethics violation that is occurring, what standard it relates to specifically, or what standard it most relates to, the steps that we're going to take, and how the Office of Human Resources would be involved in those steps. In scenario 1, we have a teacher who has established a tutoring service that has a curriculum that addresses some learning gaps that she's seeing specifically within her classroom. It's about an hour every day with activities and assignments that she would grade. She charges $10 an hour per student, and parents can pay her by cash, check, or credit card. She has a brochure. She sends it to all the parents of her students, and she also puts the brochure on her Facebook page. You, as the principal, find out about this when a parent calls you asking how to register. And so then starts your investigation. So this would relate specifically to Standard 6 of the Code of Ethics, remunerative conduct. Standard 6 prohibits educators from soliciting students or parents to participate in activities that provide financial benefit to the educator without prior proper approval. And so the key there is prior approval. Did that teacher secure approval before she began this tutoring business? So our first step would be to meet with Human Resources and report the suspected issue, gather internal policy documents as well as a printout of the Code of Ethics, and schedule a meeting with Ms. Jones. You would then meet with Ms. Jones, express your concern about this potential violation, and gather details about the tutoring service from her, information about the curriculum she designed and how she communicated with parents and whether she sought approval from the Board of Education or someone else in administration that you may not be aware of, or that HR may not be aware of. And also, there is a question of how did she communicate with those parents? Did she pull information from your informational system? Was she using a platform that the school uses to communicate? And so there are those questions as well. You would, in your meeting with Ms. Jones, inform her of the potential violation to the Code of Ethics, the policies of the school, and you would emphasize the importance of obtaining approval for any activities before engaging in those activities. You would also want to contact the parents to clarify that this tutoring service was not approved by the school and that they should not participate or make payments until the matter is resolved. Then you would meet directly with HR to discuss this violation, determine if it violates the Code of Ethics and school policy and needs to be reported, and create a course of action that includes documentation of any communications, providing all relevant details, your investigation notes, and plan to provide any discipline action or additional training for Ms. Jones. If it is found that Ms. Jones violated the Code of Ethics, a report would be made to Georgia PSC within 90 days. Work with HR to determine the appropriate course of action there. This might involve internally a formal reprimand, additional training on the Code of Ethics, or any other disciplinary measures as deemed necessary. We want to make sure that all of this is thoroughly documented, including communications with Ms. Jones, the parents, and Human Resources, and to maintain any records of any disciplinary actions or resolutions that are agreed upon within her employment file. In scenario 2, we are looking specifically at a teacher who resigns 1 week before the opening of the school year. This lady has already signed her contract and completed all of her paperwork. She is set up and ready to begin her employment during pre-planning. But she replies when you have sent a reminder email and says, "Hey, I'm not coming. A few weeks ago, I had a job offer from a school. It's my dream job. I said yes. They offered me more money, and so I'm going." So this relates directly to standard number 9, professional conduct. And that standard states that educators should demonstrate conduct that recognizes professional standards and preserves the dignity and integrity of the education profession, and specifically references a resignation that is a breach of contract. So our action steps here are to respond to Ms. Bennett's email, expressing concern over her decision and emphasizing these obligations that she has under her contract that she's already signed. And if she is pretty firm in her decision, then we're going to request a formal resignation letter. At that point, it's then important to review the terms of her contract and any internal policies that you may have. You want to go ahead and involve HR within this. And you want to know what our rights are as a school and then the potential actions that can be taken. HR can help determine those next appropriate steps and provide some guidance on potential penalties or actions that can be taken within our district policies. And we'll provide HR with a copy of her contract and any other relevant documentations that they don't have that we might. And from that point, we'll work together to explore possible consequences for Ms. Bennett. This could include a report to Georgia PSC, and that could potentially impact her certification. And then we'll also begin the process of finding a replacement for Ms. Bennett as quickly as possible to minimize the disruption to the students and the school year start. And we want to also make sure that we're documenting, and making sure that we have all of our communication and actions that have been in response to the situation included in that documentation. In scenario 3, we have a student that has emailed to request placement within their schedule, not with another kid. So they're asking to not be in the same class as another child. It's a female student that's making this request. It's a male student that she is requesting not to be with. She says that she was sexually assaulted by that male student a year ago, that she doesn't really want to make a problem, but she hasn't told anyone, and she just wants to make sure that she is not in a class with that kid. And so this relates to our ethical standard number 2, conduct with students. Standard 2 states that educators should maintain a professional relationship with all students and specifically not permit the harassment of a student. This also falls under mandated reporting. If you're aware of the assault or the mistreatment of a student under your supervision, then you must make a report. And so the student safety and well-being are the most important thing. You would want to acknowledge her email so that she knows that she's been heard, and let her know that you're going to work very hard to accommodate that request. And you're going to do that. You're going to make sure that her schedule does not align with this male student's schedule. But at that point, you are also going to make a report to the appropriate authorities about this alleged assault. And that needs to be done within 24 hours of this receipt of this email. So while you're respecting that student's wish to avoid making a problem, you have to follow school protocols. There's no getting around that. For handling allegations of sexual assault, you're going to report the situation to your human resources department and the appropriate school administrators outside of yourself. This is necessary to make sure that you're complying with your own legal and ethical obligations. We're going to document this student's request and what you have done in response, including your communications with HR and other administrators, and you're going to keep these records confidential and secure. And then work with HR and school counselors to ensure that that student receives the necessary support, which may include counseling services or additional safety measures. This should be done with sensitivity and respect for that student's privacy and wishes. So even though that student does not want to make a big deal about it, at the end of the day, you have to ensure that you yourself are following your ethical obligations. In scenario number 4, we are browsing through our local paper and we see that one of our teachers, Mr. Darcy, was arrested for the possession and sale of drugs. So this falls under ethical standard number 1, legal compliance. Standard 1 states that educators should abide by federal, state, and local law and statutes, specifically any crime involving the sale or possession of drugs. So the first thing we have to do is confirm that this information is correct and from a reliable source. So you want to contact the police department. If you have an SRO, they may be able to tell you more, or look at court records that may be digitized or sent out to make sure that it's your Mr. Darcy that works for you. We also are going to go ahead and place Mr. Darcy on an immediate administrative leave pending investigation. This is necessary to protect students and the integrity of our school environment. We're going to inform HR about the arrest and the administrative leave decision and provide HR with all available details and documentation of this arrest. So at that point, we're going to work with HR to conduct an internal review of Mr. Darcy's conduct and any previous records that might indicate similar behavior. We're going to use this review to determine, has anything been disclosed on his employment applications? Are there any reports that have been made about him doing these things at school? And this is not a conviction, but it is a concerning aspect. So HR will then document the incident, including the details of the arrest, administrative leave notice, and any communications that Mr. Darcy has provided. And this is how we maintain a clear record of what we're doing. And then HR is going to also consult with our legal counsel to make sure that we comply with all of our own legal and ethical standards. And this would include understanding any contractual obligations and employment laws that are relevant to this situation. We're also going to develop a communication plan to address inquiries from staff, students, and parents while maintaining confidentiality and respecting Mr. Darcy's legal rights. It's important to communicate the steps being taken to ensure that our school is a safe place. So based on the investigation's findings and legal counsel's advice, HR and the school administration team would make a decision about Mr. Darcy's employment status. If those charges are confirmed, this could lead to termination of employment. And then this whole incident would be reported to Georgia PSC, and the commission may take further action regarding Mr. Darcy's teaching certification as well. In scenario 5, we've got 2 teachers who are also coaches, and they have called in sick, and you've secured a substitute teacher for them for the day. And then later you're watching a video of March Madness, and there are your 2 teachers in the stands cheering and having a great time. And so we're looking specifically at standard number 4, honesty. And standard 4 states that an educator shall exemplify honesty and integrity in the course of professional practice. And specifically, it states that falsifying, misrepresenting, or omitting reasons for absences or leave are not acceptable. So Our action steps here are to document this incident by taking note of the time, date, and details of the video. Ensure you have a copy or reference to the video where the teachers are seen. This is what's great about modern TVs. You can pause it and rewind it if you have to. You want to arrange a meeting with each of those teachers individually to discuss what you have seen and ensure that the meeting is conducted in a private and professional manner. During that meeting, you're going to present the evidence that you have to that teacher and ask for their explanation, allow them a chance to explain their actions, provide any context or additional information, and you're going to review the school's policy regarding sick leave and professional conduct with those teachers and highlight how their actions are inconsistent with these policies and the code of ethics. We would then have to inform HR about the situation and provide them with the evidence and details of your initial meetings with those teachers. You need to make sure that you ensure that all of that documentation is intact, that any communications, meetings, the actions you've taken are documented. Especially if there are any written statements from those teachers as well. At that point, you're going to work with HR to determine the appropriate consequences based on your internal policies and the severity of this violation. You could be looking at a formal reprimand, additional training on professional conduct, or other disciplinary measures that the district might impose, and a report would also be filed with PSC for a violation of standard number 4. They would conduct their own investigation and possibly have their own consequences for that as well. So after HR has determined the appropriate course of action, you would communicate this to the teachers themselves and ensure that they're aware of this requirement of reporting to PSC and ensure that they understand the consequences of their actions and the importance of adhering to those standards. Ethics training is conducted each year at each school, no matter your status as a veteran or new teacher. Everyone receives ethics training. So it's an important thing to reiterate the importance of this every year. And then you want to consider implementing preventive measures, which may mean a refresher for everyone on the standards and your leave policy and how that works. In scenario number 6, one of our teachers is being criticized by an angry parent. And the parent says that the teacher is being biased and is intentionally giving their child lower grades than other students. And so in frustration, that teacher shows the parent her gradebook or their gradebook, and that parent sees every grade for every other kid in the class. So this falls under standard number 7, confidential information. And standard 7 states that an educator shall comply with state and federal laws and state board policies, school board policies relating to the confidentiality of student and personnel records, and that standardized test material and other information falls under there as well. And this specifically includes confidential information like student academic records, grades, and testing results. So our action steps here are to speak with that teacher as soon as possible, to understand their perspective and acknowledge their frustration. We've all been there with angry parents. But it's important to emphasize the importance of maintaining student confidentiality and the seriousness of this violation and their actions here. At that point, it would be important to review the relevant privacy laws like FERPA and our school policies regarding confidentiality of student records. And we want to make sure that that teacher really understands the legal implications here and their ethical responsibilities in regards to handling student information. At that point, we would make sure to inform HR about the incident and provide them with the relevant details from the parent, from the teacher, from any other possible witnesses that could have been there. And this will ensure that the matter is handled appropriately according to school policies and legal requirements. HR is going to document this incident thoroughly, including the teacher's explanation and relevant communications with the parent, And this documentation will be important in regards to further actions and making sure we have accurate records in their employee file. At that point, we'll work with HR to determine appropriate consequences for the teacher's actions. This could range from a formal reprimand to additional training on student privacy and confidentiality. This will depend on the type of confidential information and any previous incidents. And additionally, a report would be made to PSC for a violation of Standard 7. I would also arrange for the teacher to receive training on FERPA and other relevant privacy laws and provide support and resources to help that teacher manage similar situations in the future without violating student confidentiality. They, in particular, may need training on how to have difficult conversations with confrontational parents, or when is the best time to involve an administrator in regards to having a presence there outside of the parents and the teacher for a conference. And we would want to make sure that we're checking on that teacher to ensure ongoing compliance, and making sure to remind them and provide more support for them in regards to meeting with parents. In scenario number 7, we've got 2 teachers that were assigned by the school to attend a high school football game on a Friday evening. And before the game, they go to an after-school faculty happy hour and had a few drinks and a sandwich. And when they were at the game, each of them smelled like alcohol. So our relevant code of ethics standard here is number 3, alcohol or drugs. Standard 3 states that an educator shall refrain from the use of alcohol or illegal unauthorized drugs during the course of professional practice, and shall not be on school premises or at a school-sponsored activity involving students while under the influence of possessing, using, or consuming illegal or unauthorized drugs. Okay, so our action steps here are to discuss this incident with those 2 teachers as soon as possible. And honestly, depending on the time frame, either way, they're probably going to be required to go have a drug test done. And you're going to ensure that this remains a private and confidential conversation and is conducted professionally. You're going to allow them to explain their actions and their perspective. We'll remind them of our school's policies in regards to the consumption of alcohol and professional conduct, being on campus, being with students, especially in regards to supervision and being at a school-sponsored event. Like, we can't do that. And then both teachers will be placed on administrative leave while an investigation is conducted. We would inform HR about the incident, provide them with the details and documentation. They're going to document everything thoroughly, have statements from the teachers and any other witnesses or relevant evidence, such as a drug test. And this will help us have clear records for their employment files and determine further actions. They would then work with HR to determine what those consequences need to be based on our internal policies and the severity of the incident. And we would also notify the PSC of a violation to Standard 3. If these educators were to remain employed by the district, I would arrange for the teachers to receive training on professional conduct, the appropriate use of alcohol, and their responsibilities as representatives of the school. And I would also monitor their compliance. They may be subject to random drug tests if their employment is still at the school. And then if this incident becomes known to the community, it would be important to prepare a communication plan to address any concerns. You want to make sure that you are showing the school's commitment to professional conduct for its educators and also student safety. In scenario number 8, we have a teacher who, while proctoring a standardized test, takes out a cell phone, and takes pictures of the test and shares it with department colleagues, and then one of those colleagues mentions it to you. And so number 10 is the standard that we're looking at for testing. Standard 10 states that an educator shall administer state-mandated assessments fairly and ethically. This includes committing any act that breaches test security and or compromises the integrity of the assessment. All state tests have multiple reminders within the directions to both the adults and the students in the room that any cell phone device or any communication about this test is unacceptable and not allowed. And any educator in Georgia specifically should be aware of the pitfalls of cheating on a test or doing an unsanctioned action in regards to the state test. And so our action steps here are going to be to remove the teacher from any current or future testing responsibilities immediately to prevent anything else from happening further. We're going to conduct a very prompt and thorough investigation. We're going to speak with that teacher who reported it. We're going to gather details about what was shared and the context. And then you're going to meet with the involved teacher to understand their actions and perspective. Like, why did they think that that was okay? If possible, we're going to try to get copies of those photos taken and any communications in which they were shared. We'll need this for our remaining investigation. We're going to inform HR about the incident and provide them with those details and evidence. They're going to make sure that we're protected with our internal policies and any legal requirements. They'll help document the incident thoroughly. We'll get statements from other teachers involved. And that, we need these for our records and determining our next steps. And so then we'll work with HR to determine the consequences based on the school's policies and that severity of that incident. This could include a formal reprimand, a suspension, termination, and depending on, that really depends on the findings of the investigation. And so depending on the severity, it's going to be necessary to report the incident to the appropriate state education authorities and the testing organization. So in this case, it would be the state. And, the PSC would probably also conduct an investigation. So we would report it not only to the state, but also to Georgia PSC. Then it would be important to make sure that all staff receive refresher training on the policies in regards to testing and the ethical standards, and how these things are supposed to be handled, because it is considered confidential information. And if we need to make any updates to the school policies, like if there's any ambiguity there, then we need to make sure that those gaps are closed. It then also becomes very important to implement policies that prevent this type of situation from happening again. In scenario number 9, we have a teacher who's collecting money for the Sunshine Fund and puts it into her personal checking account, and she keeps very careful records of how much money in her bank account is for the Sunshine Fund. So these are school-related funds that she has deposited into her personal account. And so this relates to standard number 5, public funds and property. Standard 5 states that an educator entrusted with public funds and property shall honor that trust with a high level of honesty, accuracy, and responsibility. And specifically, it references not mingling the public or school-related funds with personal funds or checking accounts. And so our first step here is to address this with this teacher as soon as possible. We want to explain the importance of maintaining separate accounts for personal and school-related funds, to make sure that, there's transparency and accountability, and then the school's policy on how these funds should be processed and accounted for. We're going to request that teacher immediately transfer all Sunshine Fund money from her personal checking account to the school, and their designated area for those Sunshine Funds. And also provide any documentation of the funds through deposits, receipts, logs, or whatever she's using to account for the Sunshine Fund. We'll inform HR about the situation and provide them with the details that they need, how the teacher is currently handling these funds, and any documentation. They're going to document our part, her part, and their part thoroughly. Um, and then we're going to work together to determine disciplinary actions by the district based on our policies and the severity. And additionally, we'll make a report to PSC about a violation to Standard 5. At that point, it becomes important to redistribute your policies and procedures to your staff for the collection, storage, and disbursement of funds related to school activities, and make sure that everybody is aware of how these things work, and make sure that they can easily access these policies as needed. And then we're going to make sure that we prevent this from happening again by having regular audits of all school-related funds to ensure this compliance, and make sure that we're not going to have another issue like that. And our last and final scenario is scenario number 10, where a teacher failed to include the fact that he had been convicted of a felony shoplifting when he was in college. And so this relates to standard number 4, where it states, it's about honesty. It states that an educator shall exemplify honesty and integrity in the course of professional practice. This includes omitting any criminal history regardless of the time of conviction. And so our steps here are to verify that this information is correct, that they did fail to disclose this. So we would work with HR to review their application documents, their background check, or any other credible information from a reliable source. And we would make sure that we were providing each other those details. And we're going to make sure to handle this issue with confidentiality, and that only authorized personnel are aware of the situation initially. We're going to arrange for a private meeting with that teacher and HR to discuss the situation. We're going to be sensitive, but emphasize the importance of honesty and transparency and professional conduct. We'll review our school's internal policies regarding the disclosure of criminal history and background checks for educators, and ensure that the teacher understands the implications of not disclosing that information. And then we'll all work together to determine the appropriate course of action based on what our policies are. And so we could do further investigation, have a disciplinary action, termination is even possible, and a report will need to be filed with PSC for a violation of Standard 4. We may also need to consult with our legal counsel to ensure compliance with state and federal laws regarding employment and criminal history disclosures. So we need to make sure that we're protecting our school and the rights of that teacher as well. And then we would communicate any decisions we made to the educator and ensure that there is a communication plan in place to protect the school and their privacy should termination, certificate sanctions, or other consequences be deemed necessary. So we want to make sure that, we have a plan in place in regards to how we communicate with families if termination or other issues arise from this investigation. And so that concludes our walkthrough of Code of Ethics scenarios and how we would respond as an administrator, how we would involve the Human Resources Department, and specifically what standards we're addressing most within these scenarios. So I appreciate your time and attention today, and I hope you have a great afternoon.